I went to high school at St. Benedict's Preparatory School in Newark. And so I graduated from that school in high school in 2016. And so my experiences were between 2012 and 2016 are my experiences in high school. But I think you will find at least some of those experiences relevant to your experiences currently in high school. I wasn't entirely sure what I would be doing at the end of high school. So I entered high school. I was initially interested in maybe becoming a doctor and studying medicine. And then by the time I had finished high school, I had received admission to Princeton University and had decided to attend Princeton University to study public policy. But between the time I started as a freshman in high school and I graduated as a senior in high school, I had the chance to try a lot of different things. And I had opportunities that you also are likely to have available to you. Most significantly, what made a difference for me was join my high school newspaper. So I'm sure you have an array of activities that allow you to practice your writing skills. So one of the most important activities I did in high school was join my high school newspaper and practice my writing. And that's a skill that will help you, will empower you, will enable you to succeed beyond high school, and will help you, especially as you begin thinking about applying to colleges, applying to places like Princeton University. Writing is a very important skill that you should use every opportunity in high school to develop. And my example that I gave you is joining the high school newspaper. If that's not something that is immediately available to you or interesting to you, there are many other opportunities able to practice your writing where you will be able to think about things like poetry and essays and stories and other kinds of writing as well, other than journalistic writing, that will empower you to succeed as you are beginning to apply to college, as well as when you are in college as well. So in addition to that, I would just stress community service and engaging with the community around you. So it's very important that you think about yourself not only in relation to your schoolwork. Your schoolwork is very important. Your homework, your exams, your assignments are very important to complete. But what allowed me to really, what enabled me or what empowered me to apply to Princeton University and succeed in getting admission there, and also to succeed while I was in university as well, is developing some important relationships and interests in your community around you. And what I mean by that specifically is, for instance, I was very involved in community service. So I would spend a lot of time on my weekends or my free time going to local food banks or community centers, or even local places like churches or libraries, and spending time helping out there, spending my time getting to know different people in my community. These are all very important experiences that you can include in your college applications as well. If you're thinking of going to colleges and places like Princeton University, these are very important experiences for you to have, to show that you are dedicated to your community, that you are thinking about yourself as a member of your community, not only as an academic member of your community, someone who is thinking about your homework and schoolwork, but also someone who is invested in your neighborhood, in your high school, even among your group of peers and friends. And so those are two examples of activities that I did that allowed me to really make myself stand out during the application process as I was applying to a series of universities such as Princeton University. But also, I think these are very important skills for you to cultivate in order to succeed beyond high school as well. A story about how even if you don't have specific opportunities, or even if you don't have the ability to take advantage of AP classes, you can still succeed and do well. But yeah, so my high school did not offer AP classes. So what I did for myself was I studied for a few AP classes. So I studied AP Economics, I studied AP Calculus, and a couple of other subjects. And so I took it upon myself. I took the initiative outside of my classes to acquire these textbooks from my school and to study for these exams outside of my classwork time. And I arranged through my teachers and through other high schools to take these exams, to take these AP exams outside of my immediate academic opportunities. So ultimately, I took, I think, 4 or 5 AP exams. These were not courses that were formally offered at my school, and not everyone will have the opportunity to study for these. But it's I what makes the biggest difference is that you show interest and you show effort in these subjects. So even though I was not offered any AP courses at my high school, I still took the time to study for these exams and ended up using some of these credits. For instance, when I took AP macroeconomics and AP microeconomics on my own, I ended up being able to apply some of those credits to my college requirements at Princeton University, and those helped. Those that actually helped very, very much in reducing the amount of coursework that was required of me when I ended up enrolling at Princeton University. And at times they were distracting. They did sometimes get in the way of learning, of being with one another, with being with your classmates, being present with your classmates when you were in class or when you're in school. And I think it was definitely something that it's definitely a challenge that you have to think about when you're, trying to focus, when you're trying to be better students, when you're trying to be better members of your community. But I also think social media can sometimes help in bringing people together and in informing you and helping you learn. And I think you should have reasonable limits for yourself. So one thing that always helped me when I was in high school was setting a number of minutes or that I would be able to use my social media every day. So limiting myself to a certain time of the day, for instance, a certain amount of time in the evening or a certain amount of time after school where I would be able to use these, and then doing my very best to not use these during other times of the day. So I also think you can try to use social media in a way that will help you learn, will help you grow as a student or as a community member. And that may include, looking for information, looking for, we can use social media for a different range of things. We can use it for entertainment, but we can also use it for learning as well. And so I would encourage you to think about, how can I use social media in a way that helps me become a better student and become a better person. It's a very good question. And time management is and maximizing your time is a very difficult thing to accomplish, and it takes some practice. So all of the things that I'm telling you about today are not skills or not abilities that I magically became good at or magically acquired through just a couple of weeks or even a year. These are all things and skills that I've experienced or acquired over multiple years of practice and thinking. And so don't be frustrated. Don't be too frustrated with yourself if you find that you think you're not maximizing your time or you're not able to balance your time the best way, because these are things that require a lot of effort. I would just encourage you to be patient and be persistent. And so if you find yourself, thinking that, you're spending too much time, outside of your schoolwork or your homework, maybe stop and think about, okay, maybe keep track of, how many hours you're spending on your homework, as opposed to how much time you're spending on your extracurricular activities. Think about, you first and foremost, you are a student, so you should be prioritizing your homework and your academic work and the assignments that you are getting from your teachers. But you also want to be setting aside, at least, 20 to 30% of your time as a, as a student, to thinking about these other activities, about thinking about how can I make myself into someone who's a community member and not just a student. So I would just encourage you to keep practicing, to keep track of how much time you're spending on your activities. That could be as simple as writing it down somewhere, or if you spend a lot of time with someone, having that person let you know, how much time how much time do they think you're spending on activities as well. So there are a few strategies you can try out, but I would just encourage you to not be too frustrated with yourself, and just to give yourself some. High school is a great opportunity to practice your skills before you get to college, because college is where a lot of these activities and demands on your time become very significant. You all seem like very bright, ambitious students here who are very interested in, going to competitive universities and colleges and succeeding. And I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will do that. In whatever career or path or college that you end up pursuing, or enrolling in, or going to. But what matters most for your success in the long-term future, and I'm speaking from my experience over several years of having attended, very elite universities, of having studied in very competitive academic environments. What matters most for your long-term success is your ability to pace yourself. And by pace yourself, I mean is being able to perform at a high academic level consistently over a long period of time, and which means not burning out or not overexerting yourself in a short period of time. So I think what I see is more and more common nowadays among people your age, people who are applying to college, people who are thinking about their academic future, is kind of trying to do everything within a short period of time. So the last question about sort of maximizing your time, I think this is a worry that many of us have. And, I think what's most important is that your physical and mental health is in a good place. And by that, I mean you are taking care of your well-being, that you are taking care of your emotional well-being, you are taking care of your emotional well-being with your family, with your loved ones, with the people around you. And I think that is in very many ways a priority. And so if that's something that you feel like, if you find yourself being stressed, if you find yourself being overwhelmed, I think it's important to take a step back and think about, how can I focus myself? How can I make sure that I'm not stressed or anxious, or I feel like I'm being overwhelmed? Because once you feel overwhelmed, it's much more difficult to succeed in academics. It's much more difficult to succeed in extracurricular activities. And so it's very important to think about your own mental health, how you're feeling, making sure you're not too stressed. Stress is a very common experience for high school juniors and seniors. I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, but when you're in that phase, or when you're in that state of mind, I think it's very important to take a step back. Maybe give yourself, some time to just breathe, or do an activity that you enjoy with your family, and then come back to your work, because your work will be there. Your teachers and the people around you will help you get your work done. But it's most important that you pace yourself. So I did I did meet President Obama, Barack Obama, in 2016. In March of 2016, I was given the opportunity to meet President Obama, and that opportunity was given to me by a program called the United States Senate Youth Program. And so this is a program that that all high school juniors and seniors are eligible to apply to. And I would encourage all of you who are interested in government, who are interested in public service, who are interested in politics, to look this program up. And so it's called the United States Senate Youth Program. And so this program is a program through which you apply, and it's generally a very competitive program. And so two students are chosen from each state. So from New Jersey, there are two people who are sent to this program, where you are given one of the benefits you're given is a partial college scholarship, and the other benefit is that you are able to meet an array of government officials in Washington, D.C. So I was able to meet President Obama. He was very kind. He answered many of our questions about politics, about society, about the state of the country in 2016, and it was a very unique and remarkable experience. So I would encourage anyone who is interested in politics or political science or government or or public service, I would encourage you to think about applying to this program. So at an Ivy League college, you will find that many of the people around you, many of the students around you, are also very intelligent, are very high achieving, and what makes people really stand out in an Ivy League university such as Princeton is are the sort of things that I was telling you about earlier. And so it's about sort of your interest in your community. It's about your interest in extracurricular activities. For instance, when I was at Princeton, what really kind of helped me stand out among my peers was my interest in journalism. And so had started, I mentioned that I was part of my high school newspaper in high school, and that was an interest I really developed. I ended up writing one of my college admissions essays about, some of my experiences in journalism in high school on being on my high school newspaper. And then when I got to Princeton, I joined sort of a local group of journalists, of college journalists who were writing for the newspaper at Princeton. And that made me stand out very much within at Princeton. It's something that I know played a big part in allowing me to succeed there and succeed in getting admission. So for you, it doesn't have to be necessarily be journalism or joining the high school newspaper. It can be things like if you really like poetry, or if you really like painting, if you really like drawing, or if you really like other kinds of creative activities. These are all skills that I think if you're very passionate about, you should pursue. And then when you are applying to college, show that you are really passionate about it. Show that you've been working hard on your in your classes, on your homework, on your exams, but you're also passionate about different activities and different things outside of your. I was part of I was part of my local YMCA. So that was they sponsored a lot of opportunities, a lot of community service opportunities, and I'm sure similarly that there's a YMCA in your community, or it doesn't have to be a YMCA. It can also be different food banks or community centers, even places of community gathering in your own neighborhood. So a lot of religious institutions like churches and mosques and other places are places where people gather and try to give back to the community. And so no matter where we are, there's always a need in our community for people to help, to volunteer, to make a difference. And I would start by, I would encourage you. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to do something huge. You don't have to kind of go. You don't have to go to Washington D.C. and make a difference there. But I would encourage you to start by going to places where your family gathers with other people in your community, and asking, how can I help out? How can I bring my friends with me? And can I gather? One of the things I did when I was in high school was I started a school supply drive. And so I collected a bunch of school supplies and I sent them as part of a program to some communities in West Africa that needed the school supplies. And so this is something I did through my own town hall. I went there and I asked, is there any way I can help? And just being able to put yourself in your community and help people makes a big difference. Scholarships are very different in different places, and so this is something that your guidance counselors can also explain to you well. Is the idea that when you're when you're applying to colleges, you should be looking at which colleges offer scholarships, which colleges offer scholarships that reward you for your academic merit. So these are called merit scholarships. And then there are other scholarships. For instance, at Princeton University, there are many need-based scholarships. So if your family makes below a certain income level, then you're given a full scholarship to study there. And so scholarships are really different based on which schools or which colleges you apply to. And it's important to think about scholarships because each school has a different program of scholarships. But schools are not the only sources of scholarships. And so there are a lot of community organizations. The YMCA that I was involved with, for instance, for high school seniors, had some scholarships available that, if you show that you were doing well in high school, that you were involved in your community, then you were eligible for some of those scholarships. And again, one of the best ways to make sure you're competitive, that you're eligible for these scholarships, is by showing that you are a member of your community. So a lot of community scholarships that are available through different community centers are awarded on the basis of showing that you are a good or a good member of your community, that you care about the people around you. And so your extracurricular activities can matter sometimes when getting these scholarships. So for a lot of Ivy League colleges such as Princeton University, they're very generous with scholarships. And so if you're able to get admission to one of these colleges, it's relatively the scholarships are generous as well, are especially generous at these more competitive universities as well. So there are different ways of getting scholarships, but I would encourage you, as you're in junior year of high school, as you're thinking about applying to colleges, thinking about asking different people in your community, are there different ways of applying to scholarships when you're applying to colleges, when you're thinking of colleges and when you're looking at colleges. I did take the SAT. When I took the SAT, it was it was in a different scale. So I took the SAT. It was, I believe now it's graded out of 1,600, and then when I took the SAT, it was graded out of 2,400. And so I think right now the SAT is important, but as many of you may know, in a lot of schools, the SAT is also becoming optional now, and so I think that having a good score on the SAT will help you a lot. So I imagine anything between, between a 1300 and a 1600 would mean you're very well qualified for a place like Princeton. But I would also say that um, Princeton University and a lot of Stanford University, and a lot of other schools, a lot of other very competitive schools are also aware that that standardized tests and the SAT is not the only way to measure academic success or academic capability. And so, for instance, if you focus a lot on your schoolwork and get, a high GPA and do very well in that, and you have a high GPA, but your SAT score for whatever reason is not as high as your GPA, um, the school and if you explain, that, I spent a lot of time focusing on my work. Here's all of the things that I did for my community. My SAT score isn't as high as I wanted to. The school will take that into account when considering you for admission. Doing well on your SAT can sometimes help. Help. It can show the university, like a university like Princeton, that you know, even though you struggled, for a couple of years in high school, that you later kind of, got very serious about your work and you studied a lot, very hard for the SAT and did very well. And so the SAT is important. I think but I think it's not the only thing that universities are looking for. The application process to Princeton University was very extensive. And so it started in November, and I submitted my application in early November of my senior year of high school. And I had started working on the application over the summer of, so between junior year and senior year of high school. I started thinking about, what was I going to write? What was my college essay going to be? And then I finished my essays early and I gave them to my teachers in high school to look at. And so your teachers will be happy to look at your essays, especially if you're applying to very competitive universities like Princeton University. I would give I had a schedule for myself. So I made sure I was finished with my first draft of my college essays, in September or in October of my senior year of high school. And so at the start of October, I gave my essays to my teachers and they gave me feedback. And then I took that feedback and I worked on my essays again. And then I gave the essays again to my teachers. And so I worked I think a big part of my application was definitely, and a big part of your application that makes you stand out is not only your grades, your GPA, and your SAT scores and the numbers, but also your essays. I would encourage you to spend a lot of time working on your essays, showing them to your teachers, improving them so that because I think especially now at places like Princeton, your essays and your personal statements are becoming more and more important for college admissions. So I would encourage you to start early on writing your admissions essays, college admissions essays, and to show them to your teachers not only once but twice, and to make sure they're as good as you can get them to be. But after I submitted my essays, I did have an interview, and so it's very common among very selective universities to have alumni. And so I myself, for Princeton University, now conduct interviews for prospective students. And so as an alumnus, I'm often asked to interview these students on behalf of Princeton University for admission. And oftentimes, I can tell you that these students are very accomplished, or very capable, and it's 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 really the students who are able to show me that they're passionate about their interests, about their academics, about their community, who are able to show me that they are not, are someone who is unique, someone who has an experience. And sometimes you may not even know that you are unique. For instance, you may be the first person in your community or in your family to attend college, or try to attend or even apply to a place like Princeton. And that in of itself is a very unique thing, because places like Princeton um, don't have very many students who are the first in their family or community to go to Princeton. And so that in of itself is a very unique thing, even among students who apply. And so I would encourage you to think about one thing that really helped me while I was applying to Princeton. For instance, when I interviewed for Princeton, but even now when I conduct interviews on behalf of Princeton University, um, one of the things that helps is trying to understand how are you different from everyone else who is at Princeton or applying to Princeton. And the people who are at Princeton and applying to Princeton um, are people who come from are still people who come from a very privileged kind of specific background that is not sort of representative of kind of the diversity that I see in this room before me today. So. And I'm asked to write an evaluation of the student after I conduct the interview. So I ask them about their extracurriculars. Oftentimes, I don't really, I myself don't ask about their grades or their SAT scores, because that's something the university considers itself. But what they want, for example, when they ask, when you're participating in an interview for admission, what is most important for me to understand is how would you make Princeton a better place? How would you make Princeton a more diverse place? How would you improve the community there? And I think, as I was saying, thinking about yourself, thinking about, you're all very unique people. Each one of you has very, very unique interests and very unique stories about your backgrounds, what motivates you to study, what brings you to applying to Princeton. And I think when I write my evaluation, what I try to emphasize is this is how this student would make a difference, would stand out at Princeton. And it's not, most of the time, it's not academically, but most of the time it really is sort of thinking about a person's experiences, So for myself, what I think I tended to focus on was the fact that my family, we are sort of a family of immigrants. And so we came to the US and we had a very specific story of immigration to the US. And so speaking about that, thinking about, there are not a ton of other stories like my family or my story about immigrating to the US that made a difference or made me special at Princeton. And so thinking about that is a good way to thinking about when you're part of an interview, or when you're participating in an interview, thinking about yourself, how am I special? How do I stand out? I studied at an international school, so I did my master's degree a couple of years ago in the UK. So I was in London, and I studied at a school outside of the United States. And if you're applying to an international school, I would pay very close attention to the admissions requirements. They're very different from the US requirements. So some of them, for instance, I know in the UK, one of the things that are looked more closely at is the standardized test scores. And so you not only need to take the SAT, you need to take a few other standardized tests that are required to get admission. Oftentimes, there's not the same system of financial aid or financial support. And so oftentimes it's when you're an international student in another country, in which you're not a resident or a citizen, what happens is that you're asked to pay more money than the students who are a resident or part of that country. It's also something that I think, if you study in an international program, then you should think about, whether that program will let you come back to the United States, or whether that's something that, means that you'll have to continue, working or living in that country. And so there are lots of questions to think about when you're thinking about an international program that are very different from a US program.